Welcome back to the IoT Arena here at LuxLive. If you were here in the earlier sessions, or even if you weren't, the fact is that there are many technology standards at play, and to a large extent competing against each other. And to support the IoT, we have visible light communication, Bluetooth, Zigbee, Z-Wave, narrowband IT, Thread, IoT Ready Alliance, Power over Ethernet, Dixie cups. And anyway, and that's not even all of them. So our presenter, Martin Woolley, from the Bluetooth Special Interest Group. Martin is the EMEA. Tell me your title again.
I'd like you to guess. Maybe I'll get a promotion out of this. Officially, I'm a technical program manager, whatever that means, for the EMEA region. My concern is actually developers. That's who I kind of look after and talk to usually.
All right, so we've cleared all that up. The clue is in the name. Martin is going to talk about Bluetooth, and I'll just say one other word before I hand it over, and that is, at the last two LuxLives, people have been saying, oh yeah, this IoT, we all love it and its possibility. It will really get going when we get Bluetooth mesh. And it's coming in 2 months, it's coming in 3 months. And that was the word 2 years ago, and that was the word a year ago. And it never came until a few months ago. So on that note, over to Martin Woolley from Bluetooth Special Interest Group. By the way, they're the people that derive Bluetooth protocols and put them down into law, for lack of a better word. All right.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you to everyone here for coming along. Very nice to see so many people in the room. So, I'm Martin again. I have a job title, you just heard that, and I work for this organization called the Bluetooth Special Interest Group. Now, people tend to have heard of Bluetooth, but don't necessarily know who the Bluetooth SIG are, so just in case, Bluetooth is a standard, and the Bluetooth Special Interest Group are the standards organization who kind of look after that standard so that devices from one manufacturer will work with devices from another. Great big specification, lots of words, all good stuff. Now, Bluetooth itself has been around for quite a long time. In fact, I think next year officially is our 20-year anniversary, so doubtless all sorts of thrilling things will be planned to celebrate that. The fact it's been around for so long is it's fairly remarkable in and of itself, because technologies come and go, don't they? And Bluetooth is not just still with us today, but it's thriving like never before. And there are something like 10 million Bluetooth-enabled devices that ship every single day, which is a lot. 3.5 billion last year. We have a graph. We can see the numbers are kind of going up in this curve. It's accelerating. It's quite amazing. And I think one of the reasons behind this, one of the ingredients, if you like, is that it hasn't stood still. It's been systematically developed and improved over the years to help it keep pace with market requirements. And every now and again, we make it possible for it to do something completely different. So in the summer, we released a specification for Bluetooth Mesh. And Bluetooth Mesh is what I'm here to talk about today. So, by way of a brief introduction to the history of Bluetooth, don't worry, no test, let's watch a quick video. I'm going to press a button now and it will work. It did. Oh, we have audio but no video. Just listen. Oh my God. Bluetooth is a true global standard, a simple, secure connection. But that doesn't mean the innovation. I'm thinking I'm going to deviate from the non-script, and we'll skip that one because the incredible multimedia impact that was meant to have isn't happening. So what that bit of video, which is running on our booth, by the way, would have explained to you is a summary of the way the technology has evolved. So in the beginning, it was a cable replacement technology, going back 19 years. So take two devices connected by a cable, throw the cable away, Bluetooth replaced that as a wireless peer-to-peer, point-to-point communications technology. That was then. Then we released something new called Bluetooth Low Energy, very optimized to be very energy efficient. Things run off small batteries for many years. And in addition to point-to-point communication, it supports one-to-many broadcasting of data. So a single device can broadcast, thousands of other devices can receive that communication. That was Bluetooth Low Energy. That was the year 2010. Wind forward to this summer, and this new thing, Bluetooth Mesh, came along. So who's familiar with mesh networking in general? Who knows what a mesh network is? Okay, 25% of my audience exactly, or thereabouts. So mesh networks are a way of creating networks of devices where any device can talk to any other device. You can almost imagine it like a spider's web. There was a great picture in the video if you'd seen it, just like that, okay? And mesh networks work in a very interesting way, which I'll explain later on, because they give you coverage of very large areas, so you don't have to worry about radio range. Now, we'll come back to that stuff later on. I'm going to start here with the case for wireless lighting, but I need to confess something first of all. And here's the confession. I have no background whatsoever in lighting, so I'm on an interesting learning curve, and I'm here as much to kind of talk to people like you and learn about the subject as I am to talk about Bluetooth. Fortunately, in the project team that designed Bluetooth Mesh, we call it a working group, lots of lighting industry expertise. And I can tell you for a fact, I was in the room for the first ever meetings at the end of 2014, and for 2 days, lighting dominated the discussion. So I've been asking those people all sorts of dumb questions. It's my favorite strategy for learning. Set aside the embarrassment, ask the dumb questions. So I started here with simply the case for wireless lighting at all. What is it? Never mind Bluetooth. My friends very patiently explained to me that first and foremost, it's about cost. There's the potential to have much cheaper systems when they're wireless than when we have to install physical cabling and so on. Fair enough, I understand that, makes sense. There was talk about flexibility, which was really about the ease or otherwise with which you can respond to change. So buildings have tenants, their requirements change, they need new space, they want to change the use of a room. With wired systems, the impact is more difficult to cope with, certainly takes longer. With wireless systems, maybe not so. Okay, I understood that to make sense. Then, they started talking about extensibility, and I had to stop them and say, well, what do you mean? And the talk then moved on to, I guess, the complexity of the requirements that certainly commercial buildings bring to the world of lighting and other systems. You know, energy efficiency regulations that have to be met, integration with sensor networks, automation, and making your lights do more than just be lights. That was kind of the vision. So that sounded pretty interesting. So then my thought turned to Bluetooth Mesh itself. So what's the story with Bluetooth Mesh in the world of lighting? And I'm going to start here. The fact is that Bluetooth Mesh was designed for lighting and some other things, but it was top of the list, because again, I was in the room, 2 days, people talking about lighting, never heard some of the terminology before, amazed at how much complexity there was in what I thought was the simple light. Not so. Amongst the reasons for selecting lighting as kind of the first thing to really focus on, there were some business reasons, some things to do with the market, that there's a business case for smart buildings and so on. But one of the other appeals was that it's very hard. It's hard to create a wireless communications technology for large-scale commercial lighting systems which are reliable, which scale, which deliver low latency, very responsive performance, and so lots of engineering problems in there. Largely because you're often dealing with large groups of devices all at the same time, and we call that multicast operations. So for the engineers in the team, which was all of them, that was also an appeal. Solve the hard problems right at the start, and you end up with a much more powerful, robust, and capable technology than if you pick the easy cases. You start with wireless thermostats, for example. So that's where we started. As a consequence of that background, there are all sorts of features in Bluetooth Mesh that are specifically for lighting. Lots of things that are generally applicable, but there are all sorts of lighting requirements supported out of the box. I'll kind of give you some examples later on. And some other things that are to do with smart buildings in which lighting systems would be installed. From a business point of view, it's worth just reflecting on the fact that people have heard of Bluetooth. I'm told there's 92% brand recognition, whatever that means. I'm actually not a marketing person, but I'm told that's a very large number, very significant. People trust the technology because they know it from their personal use of it and their business use as well. So let's talk about lighting as a platform, which is an intriguing idea in and of itself. I can't remember when I first heard this idea, but I've got to be honest, it kind of blew my mind because it really made sense, and I just hadn't anticipated this kind of a vision. And I'll be interested to know how many of you have heard this before. The idea behind lighting as a platform goes like this. It's the recognition that a smart light consists of some hardware, perhaps some sensors, most certainly a microcontroller, in other words, a programmable chip, a small computer inside a chip that can execute code. In our case, a Bluetooth mesh communications component, and then what we call application software. And it's the application software at the top that makes the product behave in the way that it behaves. That's controlling features like being able to dim the light, change its color, switch it on and off, and so on. That's the application layer. But the revolutionary idea, or it seems so to me, was you can actually run multiple applications on your smart lights, because look around us, we have this natural connectivity grid, permanently powered, spanning the entire building. And we can run multiple components of software, providing all sorts of smart building services beyond those related directly to lighting. Very cool. I'll give you a couple of examples. And if you come to our booth, which is behind me somewhere as well, there are some interesting examples of this actually being shown there. One of them concerns the use of beacons. Who's heard of Bluetooth beacons? There are no prizes, but thank you. Yeah, so Bluetooth beacons are just small Bluetooth transmitters. They broadcast a unique ID. Each one's different. And software, usually on a smartphone, can decode the ID and go, aha, I must be near to a certain place or an object of interest. So you can use them for indoor navigation. And they're really popular. The forecast is that, I think in the year 2021, 575 million beacons will ship in that year alone. And I've had meetings with household name, enormous companies that you will have heard of, and they're planning to put beacon technology inside their products. And they make things like power tools, drills, because once you have a beacon inside a thing, you'll never lose it. It's broadcasting its identity, and with a Bluetooth mesh network in your lighting system in a building, you can find all those things and map out exactly where they are. It's a very interesting idea. Asset tracking, similar thing. Find out where items are, maybe in your warehouse or your building. Track them through the building as opposed to guiding people from A to B through complex buildings like airports. So those are just a couple of ideas of what those other two applications might be inside your lighting system. Automation's important, and we haven't forgotten about that. So this is Bluetooth Mesh version 1. It includes things called scenes. This is a concept, a capability, which allows you to set up mass changes of the state of all sorts of different devices and systems all in one go. The orchestration of a collection of changes across all sorts of systems, perhaps triggered by an event. You walk into a room, an occupancy sensor triggers, and the lights get brighter, the blinds come down, the heating comes up a notch or whatever. All these things are taken care of and made possible by this Bluetooth mesh capability called the scene. One of the kind of endpoints of the thinking here is what happens to all that data? What do we mean by smart? This is one of my hobby horse things that I make speeches about from time to time until my friends tell me to shut up. The word smart is a little misused, a little overused, I think, but it can have real meaning in smart buildings. Ultimately, it's about data. If we're going to have sophisticated forms of automation that save money, make environments safer, make the work environment better, and so on, the start point for that is the acquisition of data that gives you a rich description of the building and its occupants and its systems. For that, you need a sensor network, and Bluetooth Mesh is great for that. And then armed with a gateway, that data can be flowing out to big servers in the cloud for analytics, and perhaps then to be used in feedback loops to control the building, including its lighting system. Some of the ideas for Bluetooth Mesh. Now, I am a techie, despite knowing what brand recognition means or something like that, or having a vague idea what it means. So I'd like to give you a brief technical overview, some of the terminology that you'll find if you get curious enough to start looking more at Bluetooth Mesh. So let's start here. MultiHop and multipath, what does that mean? I think it's fair to say that all mesh networks, whatever the technology they're created out of, use something called a multi-hop strategy to deliver messages across the network. And what this means is this. With any radio technology, there is always a limit to the range because of physics. Okay? There's always a range limit. With mesh networks, devices tend to send messages to each other. So a light switch might send a please switch on message to a collection of lights in a room. Now that room might be way out of radio range on the top floor. But that's okay because in a mesh network, messages bounce or hop across the network at the speed of sound until they arrive at their destination. And hey presto, with no perceivable delay, the lights all come on. So the problem of range there is solved. And the flavor of Bluetooth that Bluetooth Mesh is based upon has a range of hundreds of meters anyway, point to point. Not necessarily in a building, but certainly outdoors, hundreds of meters, 400 is common. You can do up to 127 hops with the Bluetooth Mesh network, so you can certainly cover a whole building, no problem. You can probably cover collections of buildings like business campuses. Multipath is different, and not all mesh technologies do this. Multipath is about reliability. One of the primary goals for the technology was to make sure it was very reliable. It would just work in busy radio environments, complicated, physically complicated buildings, and so on. Multipath simply means that every message that gets sent, copies get sent via different paths through the network. Consequently, if one of those paths is blocked because a node, a device that should be there to relay the message further on is broken or has been removed or there's a physical obstruction, it doesn't matter because the message, another copy of the message will make it through via one of the other paths. So you can achieve very high levels of reliability through this strategy. And Bluetooth Mesh may be unique in doing this. It's certainly not common. So let's talk about what it takes to create a network. How is one device part of your network and another not? And the answer lies in a process called provisioning. If you imagine taking a new device, a new lights of some sort, luminaire, I believe they're called, see, I'm learning, out of a box. At that point, it's not part of your network. Bluetooth Mesh is very secure. A lot of work has gone into making it super secure. So provisioning is a process which issues a series of security keys. This is cryptography stuff to the device. And once it possesses those keys, it's now a member of your network. It can now communicate with other devices in it. Other devices that haven't been provisioned, don't contain your network security keys, cannot communicate or interfere in any way with your network. And you do it with a smartphone application or a tablet application. Because as I may or may not mention later on in my slides, the Bluetooth technology in your smartphone today is compatible with Bluetooth Mesh. So we don't need new complicated technologies for developers to be able to work with Mesh. They already have what they need. So you can imagine monitoring and control panels for tablets and smartphones are going to appear to sit alongside this new communications technology. And in fact, there you go. So 3.5 billion devices last year alone. I don't know how many of those were smartphones. I don't know how many smartphones there are in the world, but there are a lot of them. We can all agree on that. And 4 years ago, I was saying that 96% of them supported the type of Bluetooth used here. I think the number's probably gone up. We can pretty much say it's all of them, I think. This is achieved through a function called the Proxy Node. So different roles can be assumed by different devices in your network, regardless of what type of product they are. And one of them is the proxy that allows smartphones and tablets to talk to the network securely, equipped with those same security keys. So what I want to do next, in the time left available to me, is to lift the lid and take a look inside some devices and find out what's in there from a Bluetooth Mesh point of view, introduce some new terminology, some new concepts. So I'm sure the graphics are very clear, but just in case, we have a light switch on the left, we have a light in the middle, and we have a sensor on the right-hand side of some sort. At the top of our specification, the protocol stack, we have things we call models. Models are software components, standardized software components. And again, the standardization is really key because it means it doesn't matter who I buy my switch from, or who I buy my lights from, they will work together because they comply to the same standard, right up to the software components concerned with product behaviors. Now, to kick things off, my light probably has something called the generic on-off server model in it. What does that mean? First of all, generic. The specification has several lists of models. One of those lists is called the generic models, and it's generic because these are things that will work, we think, on any type of device. I mean, how many types of device can you switch on or off? Lots of them, right? So it's generic. So we have a great big list of generic models to use on all sorts of different products. We have lighting ones too, and I'll come to that in a moment. Server models contain what we call state. This is really a value, one or more values that represent or control some condition that the physical device is in. So in there we have a 1 or a 0. 1 means it's on, 0 means it's off. Mind-numbingly simple, hopefully. Over in the switch, we have the generic OnOff Clients. And in addition to kind of behavioral things and those state values, the specification also defines messages that can be sent between different types of model. So the client on-off model will send certain types of message to lights or other things that implement the generic on-off server to switch them on and off. And they'll understand each other, again, because it's all in the spec. So beyond the world of the generics, we have a whole section of the spec specifically about lighting. So there are lots of lighting models. A couple of examples on the screen there. The lightness server is concerned with brightness, dimmable switches, lights. HSL is about colored lights, of course, color control, hue, saturation, and lightness once again. If I bring the sensor into play, hope you guys can see it at the back. And an additional model, we've got the Light LC server model there. LC stands for lighting control. So it's designed to work with things like sensors. And to give you a couple of examples of how this would work in practice, I'll just introduce one more of these concepts and terms. Models contain those state values. You can establish relationships between them so that if one changes in one model, a corresponding value of another state in another model will itself change. So here's an example. We have the sensor server model running inside our sensor. This model works with pretty much any type of sensor. Imagine it's an occupancy sensor. So someone walks into the room, there's an occupancy event, a message will be sent from the sensor to those lights it's associated with. I'll talk more about that on the next slide, I think. And this will cause an update to one of the state values in the lighting control server. That state value, is bound, connected via a relationship to the generic on-off server. So the net effect is, I walk in the room, the sensor notices this, it tells all the lights switch on. Okay? Accomplished through this very flexible way of building products with standard components and relationships that you map between them. If the sensor was, on the other hand, an ambient light sensor, okay, maybe we want to do some daylight harvesting, another term that I've learned. So we're sampling light levels in the room. The ambient light level is a consequence of daylight streaming in through the windows and artificial light. We want a nice steady light level in the room, great working condition for our employees, and we're going to save some money as well. The sensor server is reporting light levels to the Light LC server. It has a state binding to the Light Lightness server, which is the one we control brightness of lights with. Consequently, when a big cloud goes over the sun and it gets a bit dim in the room, the lights gently come up. Okay? And when it's very, very bright, suddenly there's some sunshine, the opposite happens. The lights probably switch off. You don't want the lights on under those circumstances. So hopefully I'm giving you a sense of the modularity of this thing and the way you can set up some very nice systemic behaviors using the capabilities of Bluetooth Mesh. And just for good measure, we probably want to have scenes, automation of lots of types of change all at once, so we'll have the scene server, and time can be important because we can schedule events to take place in our network as well, and to service that, there's something called the time server. So there you go. Models, standardized software models. It's a good job I have a sense of humor. I've done this before, you know. Things have gone wrong in the past. Yes, let's snooze that one, thank you. Moving on. So I said I'd explain Yeah, I've got 7 minutes, I'm fine. I said I'd explain messaging. We use something called a publish-subscribe model and approach to messaging. Don't want to use the word model there again to confuse you. So the way this works is that in this example, the switches know nothing about the lights they control, and the lights know nothing about the switches that control them. When you install your system and you provision each device so it's part of your network, you're also going to do some configuration. One of the things you'll do is tell the light switches what address to publish messages to. So the ones in the middle there, they're going to publish on-off messages to the car park lights group address. The lights in the car park, when I configure them, will be configured to listen for or subscribe to messages addressed to the car park lights group address. So they're going to work. Messages from the switches addressed to the address the lights are interested in will cause them to go on or off, but they don't actually know about each other, which means if you change things, if you add more switches, add more lights, you don't have to reconfigure everything. The impact of change is pretty much zero. And that, my friends, which I'm sure will relieve our moderator here, who thought I was going to talk for much, much longer, is all I have to say to you. I hope that was an interesting taster. I think I'm followed by Mr. Simon Slupik, who's going to tell you even more about Bluetooth Mesh in a moment.
That is correct. In the continuum of the IoT Arena, our next presentation is also Bluetooth, but not quite yet, Simon. We do have a few minutes for questions. Martin, thank you for gracefully waltzing through that video sabbatical. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you five minutes for a grilling.
Good.
So thank you for sliding through the holiday that the video took.
No problem.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Two quick questions for you. Not to dwell on the past, but so this Bluetooth mesh is finally here. What took so long?
What took so long was the desire to do the job right. End of story. So I told you.
But weren't there a lot of opinions on how to do that job right?
Well, of course there were, and that's one of the joys of being a standards body. You get lots of companies in a room together, often they're competitors, and you have to bring about agreements. And the key answer to your question about why it took so long was because they chose the hard problems. Could have brought something to market much more quickly if we'd only worried about easy use cases like thermostats that send a message every now and again, but commercial lighting was where it was at. Some tough problems to solve, definitely worth the wait.
Okay, and my other question is, when is a standard a standard?
Oh, I like that question.
So you know, and to elaborate on that question, there are many other standards or technologies, and I won't rattle them off. Now I've done that a few times this morning already. Many others.
I have an opinion on this.
Yeah.
I have an opinion. So when is a standard, and when is a standard not a standard? I could go home today, and I'm tempted to do it now, and invent something, give it an acronym, throw up a web page and say it's a standard. None of you would believe me, of course. It has no credibility to make that claim, but I really, really could do it. And I'm using an extreme example to actually make a serious point here. The value of standards ultimately, how do you assess one versus the other? You've got to start by looking at who else agrees that it's a standard. How much support from industry does it have? What parts of industry? So we're actually a membership organization, and we have over 32,000 companies who are members of the Bluetooth Special Interest Group, and they're members because they back the technology. They say, yeah, that's the standard. That's what we're backing for our products. That's what we're betting our business on in some cases. So that's what makes a standard, ultimately, consensus.
Okay. Any questions? One here. Get the microphone over.
Hello. As regards RF integrity in commercial and industrial buildings, using wireless, very low power, how many installations are up and running at the moment to prove that, say, a very noisy metallic building will work and we won't lose the signal and therefore performance reliability?
Well, there's kind of two parts to your question, actually. There are strategies in the technology that deal with the potential for messages not getting through the first time. I only told you about one of them, which was the multipath thing. So that risk will always be there for all wireless technologies. The second thing is that we don't just use one frequency. Bluetooth has always been very strong in busy radio environments as a consequence of that. If you look at other wireless technologies. Sometimes you can pick the frequency that's used out of a selection of different frequencies that are available, but it will only use that one, and that very much limits scalability, capacity, and also leaves you vulnerable to interference type problems. So believe me, there are strategies there to make this a reliable technology, but the basis, which is actually Bluetooth low energy, that's the flavor of Bluetooth under the hood, already performs very well in busy radio environments anyway, because of its use of the radio spectrum.
Okay, in the interest of the train schedule, I'm going to wrap it up now. Thank you very much for your attention and your interest. And thank you, Martin Woolley, from the Bluetooth Special Interest Group. And next up will be Simon Slupik continuing to talk about Bluetooth. Thank you, Martin.